His bike's burning, Paul.
Yes.
So the first thing that changed here for me, the drive part, is that I don't put my seatbelt on and always with the window open. From the moment I hear the alarm, I have 5 seconds to stop, not in the middle of the street, to get out of the vehicle and to lay down on the ground. And sometimes the seatbelt is that 1 second of difference between laying on the ground and being standing outside and getting all the ricochet. It's
Right.
the quiet before the storm.
And the 5 seconds is because you're so close to Gaza.
Yeah,
And what is that distance?
it's 800 meters.
Wow. So you actually saw terrorists driving by in a pickup truck with
Yep.
a mounted machine gun.
Yep.
I've seen videos in Sderot of something like that. It might have been the same one.
Hamas, Hezbollah, the West Bank, Iran, and the media. Israel's five-way war. Welcome to InGrace's special On Location with Jim Scudder.
Israel's survival depends on how they fight a multi-direction war. Today on this InGrace special, we're going to take you all around Israel as we examine Israel's five-way war. We're driving to the Gaza area. This is one of those things that I feel like I have to do. I think it's important to come on this mission to Israel after seeing it on TV and interviewing people over the internet. I felt like I really need to come here, especially 2 months later, to make sure that the story that everybody has heard is kept alive. We're going to be going into one of the affected communities where the terrorists came in and murdered people and did brutal, horrible things. I feel like this is so important that we get in there and we take a look and we see for ourselves what happened here in Israel so that we can say, never again.
Yeah,
So the rocket
from there,
over from
Gaza is there,
came down
and
and smashed into there.
direct hit.
Is that typically the damage that you would see if it hit the side of a building that's concrete? Or sometimes they go through? you
Yeah,
know?
it very depends on the angle and on the material of the building.
I
But
see.
yeah,
I'm gonna try to get a shot of that.
so this is one, like I told you, it was a direct hit, but they covered it.
Oh,
So-
I see.
You see, so this is one,
Okay, gotcha.
2, 3.
So were
the
these
same
houses,
area.
were these rockets or were these people that?
Rockets.
Okay.
4 here near the light post.
Right here?
Right
The
here?
One that hit? Okay.
Yeah. Now this damage isn't much, but you can see all the ricochet
Oh, yeah.
there and there.
Oh, yeah.
So
Sure.
if someone was standing here,
Right.
would be dead. This is another one.
They're in the corner, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. That's unreal. So indiscriminate.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing is these rockets are coming down. They have no idea who they're going to hit.
Exactly. But it's this one. This building was hit really bad.
Yeah.
I came here the day this building was hit. It was hit right there. I don't think we can see it from here. What you see there?
Oh, wow, look at that. Yeah, that's a big chunk.
And it went inside. So inside is worse.
It's crazy how it all exploded in here. After we were filming the bombed out building here in Sderot, I got my first rocket alert here in Israel. And if I didn't have Hillel here, I would be worried because he's like, no, that's up in the north. So it looks like we've had something happen, either a rocket, it could be, it says hostile aircraft intrusion, but he said it could be a rocket, it could be a drone. And there's more. That's the same area right there. So it looks like there's some activity happening with Hezbollah right now.
Yep.
Okay, we continue to pray for this country. So we had a rocket hit right here. So pan down and catch this. And it hit here and it ricocheted up onto this building. And you said that there were two people. One was a bus driver and he was laying flat. And there was a soldier that was kneeling down. And the soldier died because the shrapnel hit her and killed her. The one laying down, it missed him because it was, but you can see how low it hit on that building. And this was all around that same time, the same day?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Is that a piece?
Yep. This is a shrapnel.
So, do they have shrapnel as part of this rocket?
Yeah.
It's designed...
The rocket that they shoot to Sderot doesn't explode. It just shatters and just shoot ricochet all over.
When these rockets hit, the shrapnel flies everywhere, and they're designed to do that. They're designed really not to explode, but to impact and shatter, and the shrapnel is what takes people out. Sitting right here, it looked like it hit somewhere and fell down. I just picked it up, and this is a piece of terror. This is a piece of Hamas rocket. I am so sorry that this has happened, and we're going to continue to tell the story. This is about when people start forgetting 2 months out, and we want to make sure no one forgets.
Well, October 7th, I woke up as a normal day under fire with the missile alarm. I was in my house here in Sderot, 4 minutes from the station, on standby with an ambulance in my house. Woke up, and when I went to my living room, I saw from my window a white pickup passing by with 4 characters on it and a machine gun, and just start shooting people like a video game.
And you saw them shooting?
I saw them shooting.
So you knew what was happening?
I couldn't imagine really the magnitude of the event, but yeah, it was very surrealistic. So I know I'm as a medical force, there's a war code or moral code or something that we're safe. We're going to treat wounded and we're safe. And they told me that a few minutes earlier, there was a friend of mine, also an ambulance conductor, that went outside to treat the wounded, and he got shot directly at the ambulance. He survived, but the situation was very unreal.
We woke up the morning of October 7th. We wake up, I usually go bike riding early Saturday morning. It had been a long couple of production weeks, as you know how it is. So I'll sleep in for once. Didn't get to do that. We wake up from sirens above our head, rockets being intercepted over our head just outside of Jerusalem. My entire family go to the bomb shelter, and within, I want to say 45 minutes, so this is just before 7 a.m., within 45 minutes, we start getting pings of, our units getting called in, pack your bags.
And at first you're thinking rockets, and not to say that that's normal, but it's not that unusual to have the rocket.
The rockets had happened, but
Yeah.
I went into Telegram. The news site still didn't have accurate information.
Huh.
I went into Telegram, went into the Hamas, which doesn't exist anymore, their official channel, and you already, say before 8 a.m., this is like a couple hours after it started, you already see footage of what was happening, and it was very clear it wasn't just another day or another terrorist attack. Incredibly clear.
Unprecedented. I mean, they've said since the Holocaust, such a thing hasn't happened. So many Jews hadn't died.
In a single day. The rough part about it was a couple things. One, we got caught with our pants down, so to speak. It was an immediate military, a momentary, but it was a failure, at least on that day, and the hours that happened after the initial attack. Two, the amount of civilians that were killed was enormous. The amount of civilians that were kidnapped. And then the other layer of it was the level of violence, hatred, absolute brutality that we experienced isn't something that I think people were expecting. Their leadership, I can't say this about all the people, but the leadership is hell-bent on destruction, violence, and hatred. And that's what they exacted on October 7th.
Walk me through your day on October 7th.
Well, October 7th was not just Shabbat, it was Simchas Torah, which is the culmination of the Feast of Tabernacles. It's the time when the Jewish people got the Torah. So I was home with my family after celebrating all night the Torah, reading Torah, studying Torah. And it started with sirens going off in my community. Because I'm observant, I wasn't looking at the news. I didn't know what was going on. But shortly after that, neighbors started coming over and explaining that we were hit with this massive attack in the south near Gaza. And so slowly we started getting the information and the horrors started to unfold.
And that horror, I think we're all aware of it, but I don't also want to forget it. That's kind of why I'm here right now, because this is about when people start to forget the horror.
It's something that will go down in history as one of the greatest genocides of the Jewish people, which is saying a lot. This is the worst genocide since the time of the Holocaust. And the viciousness of it and the scale of it is really unprecedented for Israel. So you have a situation where 1,200 people were murdered. That is like the equivalent of 20 September 11ths. Happening in Israel. But it's not just they were murdered. Women were raped, babies were beheaded, Holocaust survivors were stolen and taken hostage. The worst atrocities that you can imagine were happening right here in Israel because of this demonic Hamas terror organization. So it's really something that's going to be etched on everyone's mind who is living in Israel and around the world, who has a connection to Israel because of the sheer volume and the sheer ferocity. But it's something that was a big wake-up call for Israel too. And I think that is something that really brought the people together and united us in the fight against terror.
I was one of the first journalists allowed into Be'eri, and there were still bodies on the ground. They were still picking up pieces of bodies. And I think the thing that struck me the most was, A, the smell of death just everywhere, but I'm a little used to that, and B, the contrast between that, because although there was a lot of destruction, but you could tell there was a big firefight there as they tried to retake it from the terrorists, so you could tell there was a battle there, but it just looked like an everyday neighborhood. There were kids righty toys out in their front yards and the playground, and just you could tell it was everyday life was going on, and then it wasn't.
Well, I think it's extremely important that the world realizes what we are facing. And this war is an existential war. This is also not just a local war. This is a regional and global war. This is a war of fighting extremism, fighting forces that not only want to destroy Israel, they want to destroy the Western civilization, all of it.
Battalions of the Hamas, thousands, about 3,000 of them, blew up the border in few places and rammed into the settlements, the kibbutzim, the villages there, and massacre everything that they saw. The army was in the conception, they're not going to do that because they just received so many working permits for other citizens, other people, to enter to work in Israel. And why would they attack? They know that Israel is so strong, there is no chance. All the conception was bad. The Hamas leadership really tricked our people easily. So soldiers were on vacation. Some soldiers were there, but just sleeping. For Hamas, the massacre was just a perfect opportunity. You need to understand that 3,000 Hamas people cannot conquer Israel. But for them to show the Israel Defense Forces without clothes, let's put it that way, was already the victory. They will remember it forever. Israel is not a place you cannot overcome. You just need to wait for the right moment. It just brings up the appetite for our enemies. It can happen. We just need to find the right moment, but it can happen. In about few hours, almost 1,200 or 1,300 people were massacred. There was also a big party just next to the border there with young adults. Hundreds of them have been brutally murdered, shot to death, burnt alive. Women were raped and then shot to death. Babies were mutilated, beheaded.
When I got here, I saw my friends made an improvised treatment site, a BLS site in the kitchen, which is a basic life support for the less severe wounded. And in our safe room in the station, there was an ALS treatment site, which is advanced life support. There was the most severe. So if something happened, we don't need to move them. The first patient who got here was a 20-year-old man who was shot in his stomach. Usually, we don't have nothing to treat him here. He needs to go to the hospital and get surgery. So we have, in a normal day, like 10 minutes before we can pack him up and start evacuating. But because of all the shooting outside, we couldn't get out. So we had him here about an hour and a half before we could start evacuating him. In that time, a lot of other wounded came. There was also police and the military came here because of all the fight that was going on in the police station. They came here, all the forces.
So they seem very tactical, like they came here so they could take out any opposition, right?
Yep. It's not only they came here, they had a very smart plan. This was a 3-story building, the police station. What happened, they came through there, which was the entrance, and asked for help. When the officers opened the door, they start shooting. And when more officers coming out, because they heard the shooting, they had over there 2 snipers in that building. So every officer that came out got shot from a sniper. And they didn't know until they realized it was a sniper. You don't know. I mean, you see someone fire at you, you get hit, you know from where it's coming. You don't imagine you have a sniper on the roof. So you hear there all the bullets, and on the building also, you can see the bullets. It was a massacre here.
How many were killed here?
About 20 officers.
And is this the main protection force for the city?
It's the main protection. It's all the officers we work with every day. We always work with them. And they all are fallen here. Every one of them. There's nothing left inside of a small flag.
What was the condition of this building after the terrorists were finally stopped? So did they blow it up and burn it, or did Israel just decide to tear it down?
No, what happened was that the terrorists, after they took control of the police station, they barricaded themselves in. And the military who came later, they couldn't get in. So what they did and what no one expected was the chief of police ordering a tank that was here to just shoot the building, shoot the Israeli police station with a tank, which is unbelievable. All the bodies were outside and we couldn't even pick them up from the streets. Only at 8 p.m. The military start moving the bodies here. We had them all packed here, about 17 bodies of civilians and 3 bodies of soldiers that we have separated to honor them. Basically, that's it. From that day until today, 53 days, it's like one long day.
The Israelis are the most moral fighting force on the planet, I believe, bar none. Nobody else does the things that they do to try to avoid civilian casualties. And yet they are being painted as the oppressors, as the occupiers, as the monsters that are killing babies. And I just keep saying to those people who report that way, what would you expect Israel to do? Knowing what they did on October 7th to the Israelis, seeing the imagery that Hamas themselves has put out, the videos that they shot with helmet cams as they were killing Israelis. All you have to do is go watch that footage. And it's available out there. I don't recommend it because it's horrible. And you can't erase those images once you've seen them. But if you go out and watch that footage, ask yourself, what should Israel have done? What would you expect them to have done? Just sit back and say, well, that's okay, sorry. No, that's not what the government of Israel, they would not be doing their job to protect their people if they didn't go after the people who perpetrated this massacre.
This is Sderot, and a massacre happened here. They actually call this Death Road now because there were some elderly people that were getting off a bus and they were heading into the bomb shelter because of the attack that was happening here. Hamas had their pickup trucks and the machine guns that were mounted to the truck. This was all glass, and this is all shattered. You see here, pieces of glass. And these were elderly people. I think 8 to 10, they said, perished right here at this bus stop. These bomb shelters were designed for rocket attacks, but they were trying to get inside so that they could survive this terrorist attack with guns, and it really wasn't designed for that. But either way, they were slaughtered here. Innocent, elderly people. This is the wickedness of Hamas, and this is just one small example of hundreds and hundreds of people that were not just shot, but many were brutalized, and just awful things that we can't even hardly say, can't even think about. The barbarianism, I think the demonic activity that was going on here in Sderot, but also in communities all the way south along the Gaza border. And I think they said about 50 or so people died in this town. But this is a town of 30,000, so it could have been much, much worse. So what's that like for an Israeli? What's that like for you as a dad, knowing that your children are going into combat?
It's a nightmare. Only our family, that means 3 brothers and a sister, 10 are in the army. And some of them at least, yes, about half, are in combat units. So that's the little family picture. As a church, together with our church that we planted, so these 2 groups, which is basically one family in a church language, we have right now 33 people on duty. What can I say? you're on your knees before the Lord. My wife and I on our knees on a daily basis.
We did get hostages that we really needed back here. It's an open wound, you know, we wanted our women and children back.
This is where families are coming, friends of those that are hostages are coming. People are assembling here from all over Tel Aviv and really all over Israel because it gives you a common place to show your support and your solidarity for those being held hostage. Now, there have been a number released, but there are still about 150 left in captivity. This is a poignant place. They have a table that's empty, a Shabbat table. They have these hanging hearts with people's names, and as they're being released, they're painting those hearts. And then here they have a huge board that shows the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds of the captivity. Very emotional place, a place that I believe it's good for people to come because you have a place, a central place, and there's some family of hostages. I was able to sit down and speak with a woman. Her husband was taken captive. And as I was talking to her, her story sounded familiar, and I started to realize that I had just spoken with her brother a couple weeks ago in the Capitol, and he was also talking about his brother-in-law trying to push Congress and the United States to put pressure on getting these hostages released. So we need to continue to pray that possibly he would be released, and pray for everybody here. Pray for every person here that through this tragedy, they would see the need for God and see the need for the Lord in our lives. We're in Jerusalem, but we're going to go head into the area that's called the West Bank. I'd rather call it Judea and Samaria. We're going to be talking to a friend of mine. His name is Mati Shoshani, who's the director of TVN Israel and Sarel, which they do media, but they also do tours, large tours and groups here in Israel. And Mati is in the reserves, as most men are here in Israel. And of course, in this dangerous time, this horrible event that Israel's going through, they've called up many or maybe most of the reservists. We're going to talk to Mati a little bit about what his experiences are there where he's protecting the Jewish people, maybe some insights that he has into all of the things that are happening today here in Israel.
The hostage situation is just terrible. I mean, how can you negotiate with people that are willing to kidnap infants? How can you negotiate with people that are willing to kidnap elderly, torture them, murder them? I don't know. I'm sure there is no easy solution here. There is nothing that I can imagine even 2 steps removed that would be the right thing to do. The whole thing is just very rough. That said, our army has done some incredible work in the Gaza Strip and elsewhere, like here in Judea and Samaria. And I hope that our leaders continue with the same, tough mindset to see this through all the way till the destruction of the Hamas and every last one of our civilians brought back to the country. That's my hope.
We can't say exactly the location that we are for security reasons.
We're in Judea.
Okay, so Judea, and that's called the West Bank. And
yeah,
that's called that because it was the West Bank of Jordan.
Yeah.
And when Jordan controlled this before 1967. Yeah. PLO was formed before that. They didn't make a Palestinian state at that time.
So we have 2 different kinds of conflicts in Israel. We have external enemies, as in ones we have a border with, and ones we don't have a border with. Judea and Samaria is the latter. We have, it's sort of mixed where every territory would have a mix between Jewish communities, Palestinian communities within, it's called C territories, within Israeli military control, and areas that are fully Palestinian Authority control, A territories, the big Palestinian cities. And all of those are living in very, very close proximity to each other. There is no, us and them sort of in a split. It's all intertwined together. And sort of the outcome of generations of incitement and hatred towards Israel is that you have not all, but many people in the Palestinian Authority that are opposed to Israel in the sense that it leads them to acts of terrorism and violence.
The place where people are most worried is in the West Bank. because you've got 500,000 Jews that live, or Israelis that live in the West Bank in these communities that are absolutely legal. This is another part of that disinformation that keeps getting put out by the media. They say it's the illegally occupied West Bank. It's not illegally occupied, it's Israel. It's Israeli land. And the zones that the Israelis are building settlements in is absolutely legal for them to live there under Israeli law. So if it's Israeli land and they're following Israeli law, they're not illegal. They're only illegal in that the United Nations has declared it to be illegal, but that'd be the same as if the United Nations declared that it would be illegal for me to own a hunting rifle in West Virginia. I'd be like, what do I care what the United Nations thinks? I'm legal under West Virginia law. It doesn't make any sense. But they keep reporting it that way to make it sound like these people are absolutely going in and kicking Arabs off of the land that they own. They don't own the land. It's Israeli land. The Israelis have very generously offered to give that land to the Palestinians 7 different times and let them have their own country. And every time the Palestinians have turned them down and have said, no, we want the whole enchilada or nothing. And that's what they're still saying. The Jews that live in that area are very worried because they're surrounded by 2.5 million angry Palestinians who are calling for a repeat of October 7th in the West Bank.
We're heading now up to the border with Lebanon. That's another major front to the war going on in Israel. Hezbollah in Lebanon, who is financed and really instigating a lot of the animosity toward Israel. And that's a big part of what's going on here in Israel, because they have multi-fronts, not just in Gaza, West Bank, the north, and other places. And so we're going to go take a look at this. We're on the northern border of Israel. Just over this hill and those homes is Lebanon. Now, the problem with everything here in Israel, it's such a small country and it's surrounded by people that are not real fond of Israel and have made statements to want to literally annihilate them. Now, the problem isn't Lebanon per se, but it's the proxy armies, Hezbollah, who's there. That's the real issue. That's the real problem. We were just told by some soldiers that just a few days ago, the ground was shaking. There was so much bombardment happening all around here. All of these homes have been evacuated. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis can't live here. Well, they can't continue on that way. They're going to have to do something about Hezbollah and the one that's feeding all of this, Iran. Now, that's why Israel has such a struggle, because they're here in this beautiful land. It's their ancestral homeland. They've had this land for thousands of years. You can dig down almost anywhere in Israel and find evidence of the Jewish people. So this is their land, but they're surrounded by people that really hate them. And so it must be a hard thing to live in these, especially these northern border areas, to know that all of this is happening. It also makes it very complicated when you have a power like Iran who's trying to get nuclear weapons. It's been, years and years they've been working on trying to do that. But if they had nuclear weapons, they would very likely use it to annihilate this, they call the small Satan, Israel. And of course, the United States is a large Satan. All of this really comes into play a lot more when you're standing here, you're in these areas. Let's continue to pray for Israel. Let's support Israel, this little country, this David among Goliaths. But God has protected them, generally speaking. They will always exist as a nation. And Christians, since they brought us so much of our faith, we need to stand with them and support them like never before.
The reality up north is quite complex. We're not fighting one force. I mean, the headline would say, Hezbollah attacks Israel. But what it is Hezbollah forces trained by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, supplied by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, equipped by the Russian army, funded by all these different terrorist organizations and non-democratic entities. They're the ones sitting on the border. and they've been trained in the Syrian, civil war, fighting for years. So they're war-hardened, well, I guess there's no nice way, terrorists, to say this, who are waiting for an opportunity to attack Jewish communities, innocent Jewish communities. And the reason they're doing that is not because they want their land back, because it's not their land, and they also don't really represent the Lebanese people. They're the enemies of the Lebanese people, but it's to exact violence and hatred on behalf of a third party, which is the Iranians. And the Iranian government sits in Syria, it sits in Lebanon, it controls a lot of what happens there, and it's constantly trying to feed in weaponry and equipment and military technology to sort of make this conflict worse and make the price that it would exact on the Israeli country higher.
Why isn't Hezbollah attacking also? Because we were looking at a multi-front war done in a surprise. Took me a minute to answer myself that what we are seeing here is an Iranian decision to send Hamas to an attack while keeping Hezbollah intact in order to disrupt the buildup of an alliance that started between America, Israel, and the moderate Sunni world, an alliance that supposed to start with the normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia is not just one more Abraham Accord country. It's the leader of the Sunni world. And normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia means extending this alliance from Indonesia in the Pacific, Malaysia, Pakistan, Oman. This is a huge alliance that was supposed to be a counter to the emerging front of the Chinese, Russian, Iranian front that we have seen emerging. And our understanding is, and this is the way I understood it in the morning, that Iran saw this coming. They said, we have to disrupt it immediately. We are going to launch Hamas to an attack, but keep our main forces intact. And they believe that by launching Hamas to an attack, this will bring the whole world against Israel. America will be against Israel. The Saudis will be against Israel. And then they'll manage to stop this build-up of an alliance.
And the way Israel will deal with Hamas reflects to the north, to Hezbollah. Hezbollah will know, I'm number two. What happened there will happen to me. So if you'll be weak in your treatment with Hamas, you'll receive a deja vu with Hezbollah. Citizens of Israel were evacuated from the borders because the enemy is shelled in the north and in the south, by Hezbollah in the north, by Hamas in the south. And about 10 kilometers and even more from the border, all the people evacuated. They just took their bag and went inside the country. Where to? The government paid 2 hotels and other places to host these evacuees. And again, these evacuees didn't come with their oven, with all their stuff. It just, boom, take whatever you can hold and run out. So the people in the land took over and kind of adopted groups and families in order to help them. We did the same, one, to our soldiers, the believing soldiers that we know in our church, and also to some evacuees' families. And that's what we are busy right now with.
We evacuated 100,000 people from the north. Our citizens are saying, we're not going back. If you don't destroy Hezbollah, we're not going back to towns when 100 meters from our towns on the other side of the fence, you have Nukhba steroids. You have Radwan forces and Aziz forces sitting on our borders, wanting to do exactly what Hamas did. So really, what choice do we have? Now, if we take in account that Gaza will take a few months, and we'll finish destroying Hamas, and then we'll take the whole army north, and then we'll destroy Hezbollah. So Hezbollah is thinking, if this is imminent, and we're going to war anyway, why do it the Israeli way? Why let the Israelis destroy Hamas, then take the whole army, and then destroy us? Maybe we should go to war now.
Another front in Israel's 5-way war for survival is a country that's instigating and financing the conflict here, Iran.
Can you understand the mindset of the Iranian government and leadership?
Not the current one.
I can't either. And I think that's the point. The point is they don't think about the world, they don't think about their people in the same way we do. It's not a logical thought process. It's a diabolical thought process. They're looking at their country, and just to sort of put the facts together, so the Iranian government has taken steps that have caused death, terrorism, and violence throughout the world. I mean, for decades. And they've funded the Hezbollah, they've funded several other rebellions and, let's call it insurgencies, but what it really is localized terrorist groups attacking everything that represents freedom and Western thought, not in the liberal, do whatever you want kind of way, but in the you have rights as a human being kind of way. And they've done that systematically, and it's caused destruction to their economy, it's caused death and violence to their own people, and they've extended that circle of sort of rot to the entire region. Hezbollah are their cronies. Hamas are their cronies. The Houthis in Yemen are their cronies. And they're just sort of cycling violence and hatred through money, training, weaponry throughout the world. And then you've sort of, that violence and that mindset has been hijacked by other people that also oppose the Western values of liberty and freedom. The Russian government, the Chinese. And they're looking at this and saying, well, this is now, we're going back to this Cold War mindset, which is crazy to say in this time and age of, well, hold on, if these people are the allies of the Americans, the Israeli people, which, and I say this personally, we deeply, deeply value the friendship and support that we've been given by the American government. We couldn't have asked for more than we were given right now. And it's been incredible. But people look at that relationship and say, well, if they're our end game, we want to bring them down to their knees, then we'll do whatever it takes at the cost of the Iranian people, the Yemenite people, the Egyptian people, the Palestinian people, anyone, the Iraqis, anyone. We'll destroy everything we need to sort of send our, there's no nice way to say this, our violent and rotten theology around this region. And that's what's happened.
Hamas is a proxy army of Iran. They fund it, they give the military weapons for it, they give the training for it, they give the orders. Also Hezbollah in the north, but we're being bombarded from the north, and that's also being directed by Iran. Also the Houthis in Yemen that are shooting UAVs. Also American bases are being hit daily by Iran through their proxies. So there needs to be a very harsh stance against Iran. And it started with this JCPOA agreement allowing them to get nuclear weapons. That happened in 2015. The Biden administration has been begging them to come back. It's described as the worst deal in history. There needs to be a very sharp response from the American administration to Iran. And so far, we haven't seen that.
How long will Israel continue to fight the tentacles before they've decide to just go after the head of the snake? Iran has said, the moment we get a nuclear bomb, it's going to Tel Aviv. We're going to take out Tel Aviv. And so the Israelis have said, well, if you have the wherewithal and inclination to destroy us, and you say you're planning to, then we ought to take you seriously. So I think it's just a matter of time before Israel must go hard directly against Iran.
So if you want peace, be strong and be willing to fight. Because without willingness to fight, the whole globe will continue to be destabilized.
Another front for Israel's five-way battle for survival is their fight to get their story told in the media accurately.
Hey, Gil Hoffman with Honest Reporting. So we met maybe a year and a half ago in the Knesset, and you were, I think, one of your last days or your last day there with the Jerusalem Post covering that. So now you're with Honest Reporting, and you've broken a pretty interesting story recently about the photojournalist that had gone in from the Gaza Strip into Israel.
Pleasure being with you, Pastor. So first of all, Honest Reporting has been around for more than 20 years. As the main organization fighting the fight for Israel on the media battlefield, which is the key to winning on the military battlefield. And this war has proven that more than ever. And I think that our scoop that you raised is a good example of that. Who came over the border from Gaza into Israel that day? Hamas came over to murder, kidnap, and rape journalists / activists came over with them, then they were complicit with them. And we merely asked questions. Why were they there so early? We know when the events took place that they photographed. We asked, did they know in advance? Were they embedded? In the end, the result ended up being that one of the photographers who took pictures that day for the Associated Press and was hired later by CNN was fired by both major media organizations because his closeness to Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, was revealed. But if it weren't for honest reporting, he would still be the one giving people around the world information about what's going on in Gaza, and that information should not have been trusted from day one.
Some of the other reporting that we hear from Israel, you have reports of the Palestinian prisoners that are being released because of the hostages that are being freed in Gaza. No moral equivalence, by the way, of the two. These are innocent women, children, babies, Holocaust survivors, in exchange for 3 people that have committed serious crimes against Jewish people.
Each one.
Right. So, but the reporting will say that these are children that are being released, so how inaccurate is that report if they were to just say children and not give a little more detail to that?
I'm glad you recognize the difference, Pastor, because media outlets around the world are not helping people recognize that difference. They're saying, okay, so it's the same. Kids are coming back from Gaza who are Jewish, and kids are being released from prison in Israel who are Arab. No. The definition of a child might be someone under 18, but if they were detained in Israel, it was because they were committing serious acts of terror. Now, keep in mind, Israel refused to release any murderers from prison, which is a nice way of saying we're going to release attempted murderers. And from my standpoint, if someone's stabbing me, I ain't checking his birth certificate to see if he's 16 or 19. Either way, it's not okay. And I wish the IDF could have saved more of the hostages on their own without having to have these exchanges where we have to release terrorists from prison who will try to murder Israelis again. Maybe this time, God forbid, will be successful. Let's not forget, to bring a young soldier, Gilad Shalit, home, Netanyahu released 1,027 terrorists from prison, including Yahya Sinwar, the current head of Hamas.
We've seen from Reuters and the Associated Press, 2 of the agencies that most of the news agencies in the world get their source material from. So they're supposed to be the gold standard in unbiased reporting. And they're basically putting out nothing about what's happening to the Israelis and everything about what's happening to the children in Gaza. They insist on calling these Palestinian prisoners that are being released children. Well, Israel doesn't put children in jail. The way that they write the story is they intentionally make it sound like Israel has 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds in prison, but they don't. These are bearded warriors that are, if you just watch the footage, look, a 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kid is not a child, especially if they have picked up an AK-47 or a knife and have tried to kill Israelis. That kid in the United States would be tried as an adult because of what they did. And but the disingenuousness of the reporting here is obviously meant to shift people's opinions about Israel.
The media has been complicit in trying to make the case for Hamas, a recognized terror organization. You have media outlets like the BBC that won't even call them terrorists. Some of them refer to them as militants or freedom fighters. You have organizations who hired people who were embedded with the terrorists themselves, who were murdering children and women during the day of the attack. So the media campaign against Israel has been frightening, to say the least. And really, I would say something that needs to be investigated just on the sheer amount of misinformation out there. There was that lie a month ago about us bombing a hospital. Turned out that it wasn't us that bombed it. It was the terrorists who bombed themselves with the missile they were shooting at our civilian population. But then it turned out it actually wasn't even bombed at all. It was the parking lot. So you had 24 hours. You had congressmen and others coming out and saying that we killed 500 men, women, and children in a hospital. Not only did we not fire that rocket, but it actually didn't hit the hospital. Does anyone know that? I'm not sure people do. There was some apology a few weeks later from some of the media outlets. So the media has been atrocious.
And how quick international media was to accuse Israel of bombing a hospital. Walk us through that a little bit. How did all of that develop, and then how was that corrected quickly?
Okay. So let's go back a little bit in history. It used to be that when any kind of tragedy happened on the military battlefield in which civilians on the other side lost their life, it would take Israel a few weeks to explain what happened there, even a few days. And by the time they put out their explanation, whether we admitted that we did it or whether we provided solid proof that we didn't, no one was paying any attention anymore. Okay, the IDF has gotten a little bit better. This time, it took 4 hours to provide solid proof that Israel did not bomb the Al Ali hospital in Gaza and prove wrong the claims by the Hamas health department that Israel had bombed this hospital and had killed 500 people. Some media outlets said 800 people. All of them said mostly women and children, because they believed what the Hamas told them as if it came as gospel from Jesus. And that's a problem, because this resulted in violent anti-Israel rallies all around the world, even in universities in America that were previously considered the safest. Tulane University, that's known as Jew Lane. I had lectured there 3 days earlier, and they couldn't believe that there would be any violent protest there. And sure enough, there was, in part because of this false reporting. And so dishonest reporting ends up costing lives. The New York Times employed a guy named Suleiman Hiji, who a year ago, honest reporting got fired because he praised Hitler on his social media in Arabic. And the hero war came around and they rehired him. And it was asked, how can you have a Nazi sympathizer cover a war that was started in an effort to annihilate the world's only Jewish state? That embarrassed the New York Times, and so they fired him again. Apparently, we haven't seen his byline since the 19th of October. But it raises questions. Why do major media outlets not have a problem with employing people that are blatantly anti-Semitic? They wouldn't feel comfortable employing someone who hates another minority. Jews are the minority that has the most hate crimes in America. We are the oldest form of bigotry, and unfortunately the most prevalent one right now, and unfortunately also the most socially acceptable. And that has to stop. And at least in the media, we'll do our part to make it stop.
Some of these marches in America for Hamas, you have marches on university campuses saying, gas the Jews. I don't understand how this is legal. I don't understand how there's not mass arrests. Hamas is a recognized terror organization by America. Where's the Department of Justice on this? You have people openly in the streets supporting a terror organization. So I don't understand how this is even allowed to happen, but it is happening. It's happening in a big way. And I think it's a wake-up call for world Jewry and also our Christian allies around the world, seeing how our Judeo-Christian values are so under attack.
In the middle of the war, with all of these family members involved, there's still, life goes on. And you just went to a wedding.
My niece got married. And of course, they invite all their peers, which is my kids and so on. So you see, that's part of the young adults. All of them are soldiers. So we decided, you know what, without the face, all their guns are with them. And my son with his son as well. Right now, while we're speaking, my wife wakes up and need to bring him back to the base. We put our trust in things that look so big, but can be in one moment very empty. And for me, it reminded Jeremiah chapter 9, verses 22 to 24, where God says, you put your trust in your money, in your strength, and in your wisdom. Guess what? I'm going to take them all together.
It's a spiritual awakening.
Absolutely.
The love and hatred of Israel are supernatural. People either love this country in a supernatural way or they hate this country in a supernatural way, and it evokes a response in them that isn't logical most of the time. They're or crying in love or in compassion for what happened, or they're filled with hate for people they know nothing about.
So as you went out and as you were starting to see all of the civilians, how hard was that to see?
I think until today it was working automatically. I didn't even start to process what happened. I just need to do my job. I don't have time to feel.
I think it's so amazing that you have combined the Hamas rocket, which is such a dark and terrible, indiscriminate weapon that's falling on. There's a playground right here, it can fall on any of these places, contrasting that with light and goodness. And I think that's the battle that went on here. It's the battle of light and dark.
The meaning of Hanukkah, which is the triumph of the light on the darkness.
People start to see that the biblical picture is exactly what's happening. So it's easier right now to use this situation to come and to share truth from the Bible. And what is the purpose of the Bible? Christ. Christ is the end of the law. Christ is the purpose of everything. You know what? It's not that in 1 second they believe, but when you go through the prophecies and come and tell you know what? Daniel chapter 9 give you the exact date where Jesus was crucified. Micah chapter 5, the place he was born. Isaiah chapter 7, Isaiah chapter 9 gives you the birth of Christ through the Virgin Mary and the fact that he is God, and many more prophecies. You know what? People now are up to listen. And the Word of God has power, the power of God, and that can change people.
With all the pain and suffering in this conflict, people wonder, can we ever really recover?
We're at a time of pain, at a time of suffering, and that's a negative thing. But at the same time, growth and substantial change only happen when you're in a hard place. So if you want to look at a change of heart for the Jewish people in this country, if you want to look at rethinking the values that this world sort of ticks on, even if you're not in this country, so this is a time to do that.
The world is desperately looking for peace. And that's what we all want. We need peace. And the Bible says that people call for peace and there is no peace. But one day there will be when the Prince of Peace comes, as Isaiah has predicted. Well, who is this Prince of Peace? Well, I believe it is Jesus. He is Yeshua, the Messiah. I believe that because he fulfills all of the predictions. He kept the law in every way. He did what we couldn't do. And there are a lot of really good people in this world, and people try to do good, but we still find ourselves, if we're honest, failing and falling short of God's righteousness, God's perfection. Therefore, God said, hey, I need to do something about this. I love you. I love the world so much that I'm going to send my only begotten Son. He came to this planet, God in the flesh, lived among us, did incredible miracles. He raised the dead. He made lame people walk. Yet he died on a cross. And it wasn't the Jews that put him on the cross. It wasn't the Romans that put him on the cross. He gave himself to be a sacrifice for our sins. And he says, if you'll just believe in me, trust in me, you will not perish, which is hell, but have everlasting life, which is heaven. Yeah, there's a lot of conflict and war in this world. We need to pray for Israel. We need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But ultimately know this, that we need peace in our own lives first. And that is when we finally get to know who the real Prince of Peace is, and that is the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to equip you so that you can show your solidarity for Israel and the Jewish people. Let me send you this free bookmark. I stand with Israel and the Jewish people, and on the back, Genesis 12:3, that God will bless those that bless the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my gift to you. This is so that together we can stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel and our Jewish friends. Give us a call today at 1-800-78-GRACE or go to our website, InGrace.tv, InGrace.tv. You might also like to write us. Our address is on the screen.